Hello.
Hey, Zen.
How are you?
Good, man.
Excellent.
Good. Excited to get this going. It's perfect timing.
So we have 3 people waiting to come in. You want me to let them in now?
Yeah.
Now we got 4. There's Julia.
Zed, we have Lauren Hamaker and Marcia Dillon from my office. I don't know if you've met them, so it's new leadership in my office, which we can certainly talk about offline. We have some of our other all-stars. I see Bob. Hope all is well there. Tanya, I see you. So great group today.
Excellent. All right.
We'll give everyone maybe another minute or two. We had a long RSVP list, so we'll let them all get down to their desk and grab their sandwich and listen in. Scott. Hey, Scott. Well, good. Well, just to make sure we have plenty of time for Zed, why don't we kick off this month's supplier spotlight? So it is my pleasure to have Zed Williamson join us today. Zed and I have known each other probably about 10 years, since the old days of Sinus Forum that Acclarent and Intellis used to put on. And Zed and I have partnered in many ventures over the years, marketing specifically balloon sinuplasty here in the Dallas-Fort Worth market for many years quite successfully. And then Zed has worked with my practice, Collin County ENT, off and on over the years as well. And so I've seen his company grow from relatively small to this huge enterprise today that spans many medical specialties, not just ENT anymore. And so what we wanted to bring, obviously within USENT, the full spectrum of what TrackableMed offers is available to all of us as members. But what we really wanted to focus on today is some of the pain points that I'm personally really experiencing in my practice. We continue since COVID and since furloughing people to have a tough time hiring good people and retaining them. We're probably paying 20% more for a position than we used to 2 years ago, and still constantly at risk for people leaving us for competitors. And while it's settling down a little bit, I really have reached out to Zed personally for advice, and I want him to share his thoughts on that topic. The other one too is it's a good problem. So thankfully our phone is still ringing off the hook, and we still have a very robust demand from the patient standpoint, new patients, follow-ups, procedures, all that. But with admittedly a smaller staff and a staff that is really overworked, 2 of my staff members are on the call with me today. I'm sure they're shaking their heads emphatically. It's just tough to adequately schedule patients and to care for them, to meet their needs, to answer their questions, to get procedures prior auth and performed in as timely a fashion as we used to. And so I definitely want Zed to talk a little bit about that too. So with that, Zed, please take it away. And we will always, as we always do on these, reserve 10 minutes or so at the end to have live Q&A. So
sure.
Zed, fire away.
Thank you very much. So I'm actually going to share my screen real quick. Don't worry, this will not be a death by PowerPoint. I'm not into those. So what I do want to do is make it easy for people to kind of mentally raise their hands. And that's the end. How about that? Nice with the PowerPoint. Hold on one second. So I'm a fan of buckets. The reason I'm a fan of buckets is it allows us to mentally understand where we are and what we really need to create. And so what we're going to talk about today are two separate issues or challenges potentially. And I'm going to run you through a quick list so you can mentally raise your hand of which bucket do you fall into. In our organization, TrackableMed, we do two things. We help create demand and we help capture demand. So if you're in a create demand world, some common frustrations or signs that you're in this world where you need to create demand would be you're busy, but you're not busy with the patients that you want to be busy with. You may want to have a more specific focus within the practice. Your online reviews are solid. You've got more than 40 and they're very positive. And your staff is motivated and ready to level up. So if you fall into that category, mentally raise your hand on I'm in this create demand category. It's not good or bad, it's just where you are. The other side is you may need to capture demand. So some common frustrations or signs that you're in this world where you need to capture, you're busy and your staff feels overwhelmed. You might be concerned about hiring. Patients are potentially getting upset with their interaction with the practice. The office misses phone calls. This is not uncommon. We did a 7,000 call study across 25 states, and the average office misses 42% of their phone calls. That's not going to voicemail. That's literally patients hanging up. And maybe you have a low count of online reviews, and we would consider low being under 40 online reviews. So if you mentally raise your hand, decide which bucket you're in, it'll help you determine what really is going to matter to you from this brief webinar. And the challenge is both buckets have a lot of holes in it. So I like to refer to this as the death by 1,000 cuts. In business, it's not, if you think about the old baseball movie, it's not when you build it, they will come. It's when you build it, no one cares. And in business, we have a lot of holes in our buckets. And so in your demand, if you're in the create demand world, there's going to be holes in that bucket. And if you're in the capture demand or hiring, trying to get staff, there's going to be holes in that bucket. But I'm also a fan in believing that there is no such thing as it just is that way. I believe that everything that we experience is because of something. And when we know what creates it, it also allows us to adapt, optimize, pivot, and take advantage of whatever the scenario is. So I'm going to give you a little understanding around the current scenario when it comes to hiring. So this is from the United States, available workforce percent by generation. What's interesting is the boomers is one of the biggest generations. Gen X is one of the smallest generations. So you have this group of humans leaving the workforce and they're being replaced by a much smaller group of humans. That's part of the issue. The boomers are leaving earlier because their retirement accounts look amazing. They've had decades of growth. They're in a position where they're okay moving on. I'm not going to work anymore. So you had this acceleration of retirement. The Gen X generation is a much smaller workforce. So there's not enough Gen Xers to replace the leaving boomers. Millennials is a huge population and definitely can replace the workforce. And I'll touch on why that can actually be a challenge. And just to level set everybody on what we're talking about generationally, this might blow some minds out there. But today, the oldest millennial is 41. So a millennial is not someone who's just in their teens or 20s. You have millennials in their 40s. So why does this matter? Well, as a company, TrackableMed is rooted in neuroscience and an understanding of behavior change. So that matters because generationally, there are behaviors that we need to pay attention to. So if we think about Gen X and boomers, the general idea about this person is they're pretty focused. There's a single path. Let me build my career. Let me become an expert. Let me lay the groundwork to be able to achieve a specific outcome. This is not the same for millennials and Generation Z. They are, hey, I want to be a helicopter pilot. And you know, what'd be cool is I should paint flowers too. Or maybe one day I should speak 10 languages. It's not good or bad. It's just the way the generation is. Why does this matter? Well, What COVID did is COVID accelerated us into something pretty interesting. Before COVID, 1 in 67 jobs was work from home. COVID hit and basically 100% of jobs are work from home. But today, March of 2022, 1 in 7 jobs are work from home. So now let's bottle all this up. You have boomers leaving the workforce. You don't have enough Gen X to replace them. You have plenty of millennials, but millennials are cool with, let me change plans, learn something new, different career path. I'm flexible. Now let's give the millennials the opportunity to work anywhere in the country, be recruited with Los Angeles wages, even though they live in Little Rock, because 1 in 7 jobs are work from home. So that's the world that we're in. And I'm not a big fan of complaining about gravity. It's there. So I'm just going to try to do things to get over gravity if I need to. This is the same thing. We can complain about what the scenario is, or we can adapt and change. So one thing, I'm not going to go into these specifics in this webinar, but as a follow-up email to everybody on this, you'll get an email with a link to a webinar where I actually will give you some tools to be able to hire and retain top talent, even in this world. And they are actionable. It's not theory. It's not, let's wonder about something. It's do these steps and it will happen. And so you'll get that link in a follow-up email. But specifically, one of the ways that we help with this is we have patient engagement services. And what that looks like is we answer phones for practices all across the country. The challenge is sometimes that brings up the word call center. I'm not a fan of call centers. Call centers, you imagine this dark, cavernous room with miserable employees, a cigarette hanging out of their lip, and just angry that they're working, right? That's not the case in how we structure our services. We are a company rooted in neuroscience, and so we apply that to everything that we do. My operators are paid $50 for every book they read on psychology, sociology, behavior change. I have multiple operators who've earned $5,000 and more in $50 book bonuses. What's cool about that is I even have them do reviews on them. So here's a couple of reviews. So someone read the book, Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me, and they said the book discusses cognitive dissonance, your thoughts conflicting with your beliefs. Someone else read The Untethered Soul, and this is their recap. We tend to build walls with our thoughts and emotion. We create a persona of the way we think we should be instead of being ourselves. Learn to let go and stay open. Brain Mechanic, great book, explains cognitive behavioral therapy and how to change your thought process to better deal with your emotions. And a book called Taking Flight, someone wrote, we need to learn how to read other people and approach them the way they would want to be treated, not how we would want to be treated. So it makes sense that the people, if they're reading these books and they're reviewing them this way, the phone interaction is different. And so practices hire us for a couple different reasons in this. They know they're short-staffed and they know they're missing phone calls, and they just want to make sure they capture everything. So some practices hire us to take overflow, and we take a simple message and we get that message directly to the human it should get to. We do that all the way to fully working in your EMR, booking appointments with your practice. Some of you might say, I don't know how you do that. We do a lot of training on the locality of your practice, so they can literally say, oh yeah, Martha, you know the Home Depot by 3rd Street? You go there and you turn right by the big oak tree. We get that in depth in understanding how to talk to patients. It creates a really good patient experience, and you're fighting some biases in patients calling healthcare. Calling healthcare is not the most fun thing in the world to do, and that drives behavior. So when someone experiences a negative impact from any healthcare call, they're going to apply it to what they think you are going to be like. That's called negativity bias. And then they're going to be looking for signs to prove that they're right. That's called confirmation bias. And then what happens when you miss phone calls, that makes you miss more phone calls because now people are calling you back angry. So it's a problem that kind of stacks on top of itself. Some practices have us answer every single one of their phone calls. Some practices have us answer just a small percentage. Typically, the best return on investment for somebody is a mix, where your staff is taking calls and we're taking overflow, because it would be way too expensive for you to hire all the humans needed to answer all your calls. And it's probably too expensive to pay us to answer every single one of your calls. So usually there's a mix in there that makes the most sense. So on the capture demand side, these buckets that I had you raise your hand for, this is on capturing that demand. Patients are trying to get to you and it's hard for them. So let's make it a little easier. The other services that we provide around capturing demand is we do have reputation management. We are a full web design company. So we handle changes to your website, those types of things, whatever's needed to help you capture the most demand that is out there. But let's say you raised your hand for the creating demand. We have some issues there too. So the death by 1,000 cuts looks a little bit different. I'm going to touch on 3 kind of things that we think about when it comes to marketing. So getting a message out to the world and getting somebody to respond. The issue with that is our brain is set up very specifically. So if you imagine we're working with old software, it was really good at keeping us alive thousands and thousands of years ago. It didn't know that we had Walmarts and traffic lights. So that's not what our brain was built around, but that's the brain that we have in the world that we live in. So the things that we think about when it comes to creating demand is first something called the reticular activating system. The easiest way to think about this is alertness. You know, it's basically the no trespassing sign to your consciousness. A good way to think about this is think of the last time you drove. I don't care how short or long your drive was. I would bet most people cannot think of a single car that you passed or followed. Now, some of you are saying, well, that's not true. I saw this car. Then I would say there's likely an emotional connection that you had with that car. It reminded you of a car you used to have. It looked like someone that was close to you. That is, oh, there's some people waiting. Let me admit them in. That's basically it. If you don't have an emotional connection, our brain is designed to filter it out. Why does that matter in advertising? If you have a commercial running that says, hey, we're a place and we do stuff, we are actually built as a brain to filter out that message. If your website is, let's say, just a picture of your entire staff on the front page, the person is designed to look at that and there's no emotional connection. There's no way to get a message through to that person. This works in all messaging, whether it's an email, a billboard, a digital ad, social media, broadcast. We need to get through that no trespassing sign called the reticular activating system. The next thing that we fight is something I had mentioned earlier. It's called negativity bias. So negativity bias actually helps us when it comes to advertising. Negativity bias is the fact that we will give more weight to something negative than we will positive. So why does that matter with advertising? If you advertise positivity, for instance, hey, call us because we're great, we are actually not taking advantage of how the brain works. Negativity bias is connected to loss aversion, and we want to be connected about our frustrations and pain. So if your website is, one of the most common images I see, especially on ear, nose, and throat websites, if it's a woman in a sundress twirling in a bed of daisies, you are not helping your website results. It's because there's no human that lands on that website and goes, oh, that's like me. I twirl in daisies. I should go to the ear, nose, and throat doctor. That does not happen. If you have a picture of someone miserable, suffering with what looks to be congestion or a headache or sinus pressure or sleeping problems, now the patient is nodding their head and they're saying, gosh, they understand me. And now they call and book an appointment. So this is why biases matter in behavior and creating demand. The other thing that we pay attention to is something referred to as the elephant in the rider. So if we just chop the brain, we're going to take two parts of the brain, limbic system and prefrontal cortex. Elephant's limbic system, little guy on top is the cortex. So we make decisions emotionally. You can try to talk yourself into thinking that you're a logical person. You're not. It's just good to just own it, move on with life. What we do is we look for logic to justify our decisions. So if you're going to try to get that elephant to go somewhere, you can tell the rider which way to try to steer it, or you can motivate the elephant. And you probably have an idea of which one is more effective. We want to drive that elephant because wherever the elephant wants to go is where he's going. The little guy on top is pretty much going along for the ride. So when you're driving new patients into the practice, if that's a desire. As an organization, we are tool agnostic. We do website design, search engine marketing, social media, behavioral digital advertising. So that's like programmatic, broadcast advertising, direct mail, billboards. It all can work. What matters is your specific market, the goal you're trying to achieve, and we want to do it for the lowest cost per acquisition. There's some calculators that we walk people through so they understand really what budget they should spend to try to achieve what they want to achieve. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you raised your hand for capture demand because you have issues taking calls and you want to talk to us about creating demand, we're probably going to tell you no, because when you create demand, you magnify whatever exists today. So if you're not ready to level up, you actually create more issues with trying to create demand. It's better to capture what's there first and then decide what you want to create later. The big thing that drives us when it comes to decisions is we are tool agnostic, but we are religious to the result. And we define that as something that you can deposit into a bank account. We are not going to high five you over website clicks. We're not looking for a pat on the back because of some impressions or some metric that companies like to share. We want patients in chairs getting treated. And that's what drives everything that we do throughout the day. So if we go back to that idea of the two buckets, capture and create, on the capturing side, we help with phone calls, we help with reputation management online, driving positive reviews. We can make changes to the website so that you're getting more appointments from the people who are already on your website. And then in creating demand, if you want a very specific patient in your practice and you're ready to level up, then we help you get that very specific patient who has a very specific need into your practice. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Keith. If you have any questions, or I can take questions from anybody about either any of the services. I wanted to make sure I didn't do just a laundry list and bore people to death. So hopefully what I said makes sense and kind of nudge people one way.
It was wonderful, Zed. I mean, a lot of information you crammed into just 20 minutes. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So again, we have just some of our absolute all-star administrators from big practices around the country on the call. So I would love their thoughts. But I know for our practice, which is, functioned between 4 and 7 physicians with mid-level providers and things, where we have really benefited from these services is kind of augmenting our own answering of patient calls. And we still miss an ungodly amount. But where we have reached out to TrackableMed is help during lunchtime, sometimes after hours, peak hours, times when we expect higher volumes like Mondays or certainly after holiday weekends. So that's been very helpful for us. In addition to all the different ways that Zed and the team have helped us in our directed marketing efforts, primarily digital. I mean, over the years, it depends on the market. Dallas-Fort Worth is a very large but spread out market. So people tend to spend a lot of time in their cars listening to sports radio and things like that, NPR. And so we've done some radio, we've done some even TV we dabbled in years ago. And so that's what TrackableMed does. I mean, they really have expertise from soup to nuts. So as Zed highlighted, the neuroscience behind our behaviors and what's going on with our practice patterns, all the way out to real knowledge of the specifics of each market. So Zed, we have a big group in Chicago on the call. We have a big group in New Jersey on the call. We have a big group in the Philadelphia area, another big group in the Philadelphia area. We have some that are more local, some that are in the Midwest. And so I encourage you to ask any questions. I'll shut up and give you guys time in the last 7 or 8 minutes to ask specific questions.
And if someone has a question, you can unmute and do it by voice, or you can put it in the chat, whatever works for you. And I'll watch for those to pop up. I was having a conversation with a practice, and she uses an overflow call center. And in the same sentence, she said this exact thing: they are horrible I despise them and they are rude, and it's the best money I spend. Because even that captures so many more patients compared to what they would miss. And that's what blows people's minds, is how many calls they miss. And look, if you're feeling okay and you're not waking up in the middle of the night because you say, well, we've got a voicemail has an 85% abandonment rate. So if you have 15 voicemails, you missed 85 calls. And it's an issue, and patients expectation is speed. You know, we have a recording of a call. I'm not even going to say what specialty it is, but it went to a practice and the person answered nicely and then put the patient on hold, but there was no on hold music. The patient sat on hold for a few minutes and you hear the audio of the patient start to go, oh my God. Oh, geez. And this is a patient that had already sent some scans over to the practice, high value patient that was referred to this practice. The call answered with the patient who'd never seen this practice saying there must be a better fill in the specialty, and hung up the phone. Never saw the physician, literally because they were on hold for too long with no on hold music. They made that decision. And that's the world we live in today. People are looking for immediate access. And if you don't answer the phone, there's 10 other options a thumb click away for them to choose.
Zed, can you explain the logistics then maybe of that service? Because I think we all are getting a pit in our stomach thinking about the 85% abandonment rate and the 42% missed calls that don't even get to the voicemail prompt. Can you explain a little bit about how you work maybe as an overlay to the infrastructure of the office?
Sure. So in the simplest sense, what we'll do is we'll answer any missed call. So we can set up your phone system so that if your staff doesn't answer it, it comes to us and we answer as you. When we take that call, we can do a couple different things. We can have a very specific process that we take that patient through to understand who that message needs to get to, and then we digitally send that message to the right person in the organization. So that it's, if it's about billing, it gets to the right person. We can also be set up where we are actually logged into your EMR if it's cloud-based, and we can go ahead and book patient appointments, reschedule appointments, really interact with the patient just as if one of your staff members is doing so. The reason we can do this is we are old school. We are not work from home. We have an 11,000 square foot building that we all work under the same roof. And so all the training happens in one room. Everyone is sitting shoulder to shoulder. And it just allows us to have a really good interaction and act as the office through people's EMRs if they want it that way. The key is we adapt. So there isn't a specific way you have to work with us. What we're going to want to do is uncover what are the challenges you really have. What pains are you feeling? And is there a solution that's going to solve them? And then the last thing is we don't have contracts. So we don't have a single customer with us because they're in a contract. They only choose to do business with us because they were happy with last month. And that's been the case since we started about 11 years ago. And it's worked out really well. People stay with us for a very, very long time. And if I had to brag about my staff, it's the neuroscience route, because we are focused on human behavior and understanding what drives behavior change. When you apply that to how you answer a call, the call goes differently. If you apply it, how do you advertise or how you build a website? It goes back to that bucket that had all the holes in it. We're plugging the holes because the holes typically are behavior based. So from a service standpoint, if we're just taking messages, we can be, today's Tuesday. So if someone called us later today, we could be taking calls from next Monday and taking the load off your staff because sometimes staff is just getting overwhelmed, and sometimes there's value, and maybe you don't know that you're missing calls or not, but you know that your staff is at the breaking point, and this can, put a little relief on them.
And obviously, Zed, it goes without saying, you've been very generous offering USENT members discounts on all of these services broadly. And so if anyone is contacting TrackableMed, make sure you identify yourself as a US ENT member so we can plug that pricing in for you.
That's right. And so the follow-up email,
Yeah.
what we'll do is we'll get an email out to everyone that it's going to have 2 links. One link that'll just give them some more information. The second link is if you are in a tough spot hiring and holding on to top talent, you're concerned of losing your best people, or you need people. Maybe it's not front office staff, maybe it's MAs, somebody else, and you don't know how to get new people into your business. We're going to put a link in there for a webinar that will teach you how to do it. And we know, because it's how we do it. We have not lost staff. We do not pay 20% more. We have really good people who are bought into the organization, and they're not upset at Sunday night. You know, they know that the experience working during the week is going to be good for them, and they are passionate about doing good work. And that is created on purpose. And it's a system. It's literally a recipe that anybody can follow if they choose to. So we'll put that webinar in the follow-up email.
Thank you. That's fantastic. All right. Well, our time is up. So thank you for your attendance here. Obviously, many people will also watch this recording at a later date. So please reach out to Julia or I if you need to get in touch. Obviously, the TrackableMed team will send out a follow-up email with the contact information there. I really encourage you to take a look. It's an invaluable service. It's not a luxury. I would argue that it's a necessity to at least take a look at your current operations and see where they might be able to support you. All right, everybody, have a great afternoon, great Tuesday, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.